And welcome to the September 4th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. This is awful loud, isn't it? Can we turn it down just a touch? Our consent agenda, so I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations for A, B, and C. So the minutes of the council meeting, special meeting, and the agenda. Moved by Councillor Fraz and seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Correspondence. We have one piece of correspondence from the Regional District of Nanaimo, Northern Community Sewer Local Service Amendment, Bylaw number 889.74.2019. I need a mover and a seconder for that, as it's outlined by Councillor O'Brien, second by Councillor Patterson. Any questions? Everybody know what they were talking about on here? They've just extended it for one lot. So all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. The two other pieces of correspondence, I need somebody to make the recommendation to receive those two pieces by Councillor Greer and seconded by, all right, don't leave me hanging out here, Councillor Chandler. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Piece of correspondence from Michelle Stilwell. I need a somebody to move and second a recommendation to be received. Moved by Councillor Fraz and seconded by Councillor Greer. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Reports. Mr. Russell, would you care to start us off for this new session?
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. For council consideration this evening is issuance of a development permit at 439 Hirst Avenue West. The development permit will facilitate a number of improvements on the property, including the replacement of a bridge, an allowance to provide some drainage for a neighboring property, some fencing, as well as an area on the property to allow for the addition on the existing dwelling, and then a future parcel site. I believe the proponent hopes this is the last application that they have to make, and so it incorporates a number of items at this time. The recommendations are as per the agenda.
I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Greer. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the next issue?
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. Before Council this evening is an introductory report for the rezoning application at, where'd the address go? At 249 Hirst Avenue West. It's for Inclusion Parksville to add a kitchen facility in order to provide training and other opportunities for their clients. Further details are provided in the report. In order to be in compliance with council policy, the proponent needs to have an opportunity to to speak to council about their application. So with us this evening is Executive Director Barb Reed, who I'd like council's permission to invite to speak to council before considering the recommendations in the report.
By all means, please come forward. Could you turn the, it's the little talking head icon. Yeah. No, you turned it off. There you go.
Is it on?
It is now.
I'm Executive Director Barb Reed from Inclusion Parksville Society, and this is Board Chair David Pasco that's joined me tonight. Thank you for having us. We took over the old ambulance building at 249 Hirst Avenue West, and we've done quite a few extensive renovations to the building already, and now we would like to renovate the garage space into a kitchen, commercial community kitchen. And it would provide opportunities for all members of this community who have barriers to employment. It can provide employment, training opportunities. We can service the community in all different areas. I've developed a cooperative that has been approved in which to run the kitchen under. And we can go in many different areas besides just cooking and kitchen and prepping and serving. There's an opportunity to upcycle, recycle, have community gardens, feed some people that can't afford to feed themselves. It can be quite a mecca, a meeting space, a place where people are included no matter what. And we'd really like the opportunity to see this amendment go through so we can see our dreams come true.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any
You
questions?
guys do amazing work. So is there any questions? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Barb anyways, and sorry, I didn't get, David, yeah, I know Barb, so. I applaud your initiative, right up front anyway, so we tried this a while back under the other association, and it was a good idea, and I was sad it didn't get off the ground. I applaud you for taking it to the next level and taking it there, because it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for these individuals. I have a question. Are you going to open up like a coffee shop or something like that on the site?
There's plans to have a cafe along with
Right.
the kitchen facility. yes.
Similar idea to Coco Cafe in Cedar?
Similar, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then my only question, knowing where that's going, I know your location and so forth. Do you have adequate parking and so forth? Like,
Yes.
okay, for that. And so at some time, if you open up a coffee shop, you'll be coming to us like for permission to erect signs or something like that? Or is it going to be a public coffee shop? Or
Yes,
just-
it will be
yeah.
public, and we
Okay.
will get all the right permissions.
You know where I was going. I really appreciate that. Thanks very much. I think it's a
Thank
great
you.
idea. Good for
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien stole a few of my questions.
Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Barb. Hi, David. It's a pleasure to see you and that here. One of the other aspects I wanted to touch on was accessibility. When you're designing your kitchen and thinking about things like that, I hope that you think about accessibility and heights and requirements and everything for some of your clients that may be wheelchair bound or anything like that. From someone who has a kitchen, I know that the usual height of a prep table isn't always the best for different heights of my staff. And so I really, really do applaud you as well. I'm looking very much forward to this. I'm hoping that you'll be able to have some food safe classes and things like that in there as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not familiar with this organization. I was wondering how it's funded and whether this is a long-term situation.
Yes, it is a long-term situation. I have actually Coastal Community Credit Union looking at doing some backing, and there's some other places, and I've developed a cooperative in which to sort of run the kitchen under. The rest of my agency is funded by Community Living British Columbia, so it's a ministry that's under, it's a Crown Corporation that funds us.
So is this funding on a regular basis? I mean, are you getting a grant every year for this?
We're working on that, yes, under the cooperative. And the rest of my staff are already funded. The staff that work with my people to help train, I've already had the funding for that. So it's just the funding for the kitchen piece
Okay,
that we're
thanks.
working on. Thanks.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good day to you both, and glad to see you both here. It's been a long road, I know, Barb, for getting this going. That's a lot of work, so.
Yeah.
I think it's notable that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're one of the longest-term charities or nonprofits in the area, correct? How many years?
We're celebrating our 60th anniversary in November. We've been serving this community proudly since 1959.
Excellent. Thank you.
Me neither.
Councillor Wilson.
Through your worship, thank you. I've been to your facility, actually with Councillor Chandler, and you do a great job. So all the success to you.
Thank you.
If we're all set, I'll call the question. All those in, did we do the, did we? No, I don't either. That's what I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations, Councillor Chandler and Councillor Patterson. Any other questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you. I've got some information about us too for those that aren't
thank you.
familiar with us. Could pass them around.
I thought we missed that. Mr. Russell, would you please give us background on the next issue?
Certainly. For council consideration this evening is issuance of a development permit at 171 Jensen Avenue West. This permit, if issued, will essentially reissue a permit that is ready to lapse this September. The recommendations are as per the report.
I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Greer, second by Councillor O'Brien. Discussion? Councillor Wilson.
Through your worship, I just want to say I'm really happy to see some of the sustainable features. I believe, if Director Russell, there is a green roof still in this.
If I may, through Councillor Wilson, unfortunately there was an error in the original staff report 2 years ago. The green roof was not included in the previous permit. What had happened was about a year prior, maybe not quite a year prior, there was another proposal that had a number of variances and had an additional floor and roof garden. But when those variances did not proceed, ultimately that specific feature was not incorporated into the last permit. But unfortunately, there was a text error in the prior staff report that made a note of that, and that's why it's not in the report this evening.
Thank you. So now we've taken the green roof out. So anyway, some of the sustainable features are, welcome. The electric charging, solar ready, and bioswales. The only thing that I would have to say, and this is from public opinion that has come to me, is that the flat roof doesn't really follow our OCP, and it does make the building look quite industrial with the outside exterior metal staircase, but I guess that's the price we're going to pay for a few sustainable features, perhaps.
Any other comments, questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Mr. Doxey, you're up.
So this report is conversation looking for direction from council for how to proceed with cross-section builds that would affect the development industry, as well as the road renewal program through the capital funding program that the city does itself to renew infrastructure as we age and grow. So firstly, the topic came forward back in July, and I'll just cover the brief highlights of it. We looked at some cross-sections and the evolution of the current local road cross-section back to prior to 1993, where there was no standard, but what was built was a set of curb-lined roads with no sidewalk. In 1993, that was upgraded to include a 1.5 meter walk on both sides, and then in 1996, you can see through in the report, there was a bit of customization where they brought in 3 different renditions of the local cross-section. That was then, just trying to follow my own writing here, just in 1996, so they had three local cross-sections that were used, basically to suit the individuality of each site or each road, so that may accommodate more or less parking on one side, parking on 2 sides, a driving lane with room for bicycle accommodation, and then it may as well occasionally have sidewalk, but it wasn't necessarily all the time. It was kind of intermittent as staff saw fit. In 2002, for the purpose of consolidating for simplicity, but then also for the purpose of reducing construction cost and the land requirements that were required to get some of the wider cross sections, they reduced that down to one simple RC1 urban local cross section. So that reduced the amount of land that was required. It took it from a minimum required of 20-meter right-of-way down to an 18. The number of travel, the lane widths and with parking accommodation went from 5.5 meters down to 4.5. So that's where you can see some of the cost savings that went into play with reducing and simplifying the cross sections. And then the sidewalks, they were also reduced from going from both sides of the road down to one side of the road at a 1.5 meter walk. Later in 2016, in the most recent Transportation Master Plan update, it was recommended and followed through to carry that back up to a 1.8 meter sidewalk, but it was only going to be on one side of the road. And all other criteria in terms of lane widths, curbing, and things like that remained consistent. We take a look at just how many roads are we talking about, like what does this affect in the city? So currently there's 57 kilometers of urban local road that would be classified in this area, with 42% of them, or 24 kilometers, are already at the RC1 or more or less built out standard. 18 of them are remaining local roads that are in the partial urban standard, so that might be urban on one side and a rural ditch on the other, or any manner of combination of things in between. And then there's the 15 kilometers, or 26% of the remaining, the 15 kilometers of the 57 total urban locals are actually still sitting in the rural cross-section state, so just 2 lanes of traffic and a ditch on either side. There's several examples in the report for your comparison. There's a couple key features that are highlighted in the report as well. So some of the renditions of the, we'll call them the current urban local cross-section, the RC1, some of the modified lesser versions with lesser curb, some shoulder work, the RC1A and the RC1B. They have some reduced pavement widths. They can accommodate some drainage, but it's localized drainage to pick it up to take it into the closest storm sewer system. When you get into the rural cross-section, as you can see, there's very little to no capacity to handle surface drainage from adjacent properties. It's just you're dealing with road drainage, so that's going to have an impact on development potential, infill potential, and potential investment on the block, as well as the RC1C, or the rural cross-section. That could be easily modified with some widths. So if we wanted to, say, add an additional lane to that, you'd be looking at somewhere in about the $500 a meter to add that on. Of course, right-of-way acquisition, land acquisition, boulevard restoration, tying things back into existing built-up front yards, that also adds additional cost to that as those things come forward. And we're only going to capture those on a detailed design level. So we're kind of looking at a very high level at this scope. Furthermore, towards the end there, we broke that down into what this looks like in terms of evaluation of total roadways in the 20-year plan in the urban local cross-section category that would need to be upgraded. So if you continue to take along the rural portions of those, bringing the rural ones into the RC1, that would cost $52.5 million, whereas the modified RC1A and the B would be in the $31.5 and the $33.5 million range, respectively, and then followed by the rural cross section. Actually comes in more, and that's again just due to like additional boulevard restoration costs, land acquisition cost, and more sensitive treatment of that boulevard space because you don't have a local drainage network or storm system. You are having to be really careful with how you treat drainage longitudinally along the road, not just forwards and back along the cross slope. So it adds a little bit of complexity to it. The recommendation in the report, the recommendation was based on kind of a hodgepodge of past treatments where staff evaluated the cross-section, the local conditions, the request for services, the development potential on the site, And in prior days, they would make some evaluation and they might modify the cross-section to fit within the corridor. So if there were utility constraints, right-of-way constraints, they would do so. What we would propose would be that we would maintain the existing RC1 standard as a budget-setting tool, but as opposed to maybe bringing forward projects to council for approval at the stage of either design award or construction award, we would bring forward the proposals for direction to council when we're scoping out the project just prior to release in the spring, so that there's a bit of a touch point with council to make sure that things are more or less as anticipated, and that say sidewalks aren't being ruled out, or a bike lane isn't being ruled out because there's a proposed one on the next block, or just a matter of staging and phasing and things like that. So it would basically give council that circle check or a touch point to have a final say.
Thank you. I need a mover and seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Discussion? No, they want to maintain, exactly. So do you have a, good, please.
If I may, through your worship, thank you very much, Mr. Doxey, anyways, for this evolution of the progression of the road standards in Parksville. It was quite interesting, and you went to a lot of work, and we do appreciate where it's come from. Just my own personal comments after reading through this 3 times anyways to try and get a handle on this whole thing. We're all talking about cost savings, not spending money redundantly anyways and wastefully, but outside of the downtown area, it's certainly suitable for in your reports anyways to going to one sidewalk on one side of the road instead of both sides of the road, but I certainly wouldn't want to see that happen in the downtown core area. I'm not pointing any fingers here, but I think a mistake was made on Corfield, the new Corfield in front of the co-op gas station leading to in front of where American Kitchen is there. There's no sidewalk from that portion all the way along, and I see numerous people crossing over to jaywalking across Corfield. It's become a dangerous area, and because they come out of the laneway behind the gas station, and they're jaywalking across there and heading over to the Corfield Plaza unit. And so I was really sad to see that sidewalk eliminated. So that's just my first comment. We're also looking for cost savings and so forth. And part of it, your discussion has talked about roads and the swales and so forth, but the sidewalk itself in the downtown core of Parksville, we have a downtown standard, and I've brought this up before anyways, which is a grid pattern of diamond patterns, which is just outside here on Jensen. And I and the Oceanside Accessibility Organization are very upset about the problematic of the different sections of the concrete heaving up and so forth in between frost, snow, and ice, as well as roots pushing it all up. So, and it costs a lot more money to do it because it's a multiple pour situation. So I would say if we're looking for ways to save money, any sidewalks in the downtown core, instead of using that old downtown standard, I would suggest just going to a standard broom finish once again, which is way more preferred by people with mobility issues and so forth. It's going to be less costly, and it's going to save a fair bit of money. So that's my only comment at this particular point. I like your idea of sticking to the RC1 with council having comment when brought it as a touch basis just before you go to tender. I think that's an amazing idea, just so we can tweak it if necessary. But thank you very much.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Acting Director. Thank you for the really in-depth report. Councillor O'Brien talked a little bit about sidewalks aspect and everything, but our recommendation is to maintain the existing urban local road cross-section standard RC1, but in the general analysis, there was a bit of a paragraph and everything in there too that council could defer this discussion to the next city transportation master plan. So, which is outside of the 2019 budget at this point in time. So I guess my question in some ways is that we maintain what's on our books for the next 5 years, because that's what our 5-year budget and everything kind of looks like. But in this report, we kind of looked at 20 years out of the cost factor, anywhere between 52 and 30 million, and that's a heavy load. So I guess my question is, you didn't put to defer it to a transportation master plan update, but have asked for the recommendation tonight. Is that correct, and why?
If I may, through your worship, it's mainly right now, the transportation master plan to be updated isn't on the 20-year plan. So we'll be working with planning to get the master plan updated in place and ahead of any OCP updates. So it works well if they're kind of coordinated. So one might happen one year and one might happen the following year. So they're basically feeding each other. So that's basically where we're at, and so it's really just for the sake of simplicity that we felt that we could continue forward with the current cross section and add a touch point, for each project where we just report to council and get some specific direction. So
Certainly.
Thank you. So moving forward, when we look at our 20-year plan and when we look at our streets and upgrading aspects and everything, I'll use Corfield as an example, because Councillor O'Brien's correct. We kind of dropped the ball in some ways on that aspect. But we as a council don't normally look in depth at the upgrades on some of our city roadways. And should we be?
probably, if I may, through your worship, probably not in depth in the sense of detailed design, but it's probably important to know what key features are going to be present on a project and what the value is that you're paying for and what is not being included and why. It helps to defend, why is streetlights not included? Why was sidewalk on one side or not? They sometimes are for very good reasons, and they're just, they could be communicated a little better.
Okay, I'm going to speak for a minute or two on this. The original request that we put in back in July was so that we could look at the overall city, so that we weren't building the same road on a back street somewhere as we're building in the downtown core, as Councillor O'Brien says. I think I'm looking at this, and correct me if I'm wrong, because, first off, we use the word, well, it's simpler. Quite frankly, for $20 million, I don't need simpler, I need the right answers. And really what we've got here is that from the RC1 at $52 million, which is what is over the 20-year budget, down to the whatever it is, RC, I've got to get my glasses on. RC1C at $34 million or $31 million. There's $20-odd million over 20. That's $1 million a year of capital spending that we're looking at. And I'm not suggesting that all roads should be, with no culverts and no sidewalks and everything else. But what we wanted you to come back with was a suggestion that said, does it make sense that on the side streets, maybe we put RC1C, and on the main streets we put RC1s. We have a variation set out for the primary roads and the secondary roads throughout the city to save money. All of this has a dramatic effect on the overall financial wherewithal of this city. We look at it and we say, the DCCs are calculated on these numbers that we go through. So that's $20 million. Part of that will be calculated into the DCCs. The capital spending that we're putting forward for the next 20 years could be affected. It could be the difference between fixing our park or doing something nice to our park or doing a